Okay, so let's start. My name is Uri Bahar, and I want to talk today about infusing and embedding analytics in the context or from the point of view of the product manager or the CPO or the product owner, which is usually a persona that is kind of left in the background a bit when we talk about or when we talk with customers about internal use cases of BI. But when you step into the context of embedding analytics or infusing analytics into a B2B product, especially in the OEM model, then the real stakeholder that we should care about is that product manager. So IT and the data teams are still important because they're the ones who are going to give us the blessing that the solution is doing technically what it should be doing and that it's integrating with the right systems. But at the end of the day, it's the CPO that is going to go to the CFO and ask for the budget to actually implement this or buy the subscription or whatever they choose, whatever method they choose to actually implement the solution. So I want to take a look first at the advantages of really driving this value inside the product from the point of view of these personas. But first, we need to define what is infused analytics. The term embedded and infused, so the term embedded analytics, it's something that you probably heard before. It's not a new concept. And usually when we talk about embedding analytics, we're talking about a bit from the technical perspective of how do you embed the SDKs, the APIs, the iframe that you might be using to put that widget or a group of widgets within your product. And again, I'm taking this from the point of view of the OEM B2B product perspective. And then the embedding was the ability to take that dashboard or to take that bar chart or whatever it is and just put it in front of the user. And Infused Analytics is trying to take that one step further and not only look at just technically taking that component and putting it in front of the user, but also creating the analytics as a complete kind of seamless experience within the workflow of that user. And that's what's going to really make that into a strategic change to the way that your product, if you're the product owner, the way that your product is going to behave and the way that your customers are going to use the product. In the example that we see here, Rihanna in this fake CRM product that we have, when she lands on the homepage of the CRM system that she's always using, the first thing that she sees is a couple of APIs, and from there she might be drilling into other more advanced analytics. But the whole idea is to take KPIs and alerting and advanced analytics and take all of these things and put it as part of her workflow. So it's not another system that she goes outside to export something and then run it in her separate maybe BI tool. It's not kind of a white labeled side of the product that is exposing the capabilities. It's something that is really ingrained into the seamless experience that she has. Again, when she's, in this case, she's the CRO, so she needs to look at her performance of the account executives that are reporting to her. So she wants to know when she logs in immediately what are the KPIs she needs to care about. And when we look at that, also from the point of view of the advanced analytics, and these are the next couple of examples that we'll see, we want to give her the option. We want to give her the option, and the other users of that system, we want them to have access to advanced analytics at the tips of the fingers. So they don't have to go to their data science team. They don't have to go to the data science team of the vendor from which they maybe have bought the kind of the embedded or infused analytics solution from. She can go in, she can run the forecast, she can actually change the forecast period based on her requirements just as she walked into the office today, and maybe tomorrow she's going to change that. She doesn't have to call anyone in order to make this change. So again, the whole idea of the infusion versus the embedded is really to make that just as part of the day, part of the workflow. And the next example is also taking that idea of taking that extra step. So in this case, she's looking for a reason of maybe some kind of anomaly or some kind of maybe an excess of performance within her team, and she can go and use AI, either existing AI models that are in the system or AI models that maybe her team has uploaded, to try and figure out who is that account executive that's outperforming, or who is that account executive and maybe with a combination of an account executive with a specific line of products that is driving the sales up or down. So again, she has that part of her day-to-day. This is her job. She doesn't want to go to IT or to the vendor of that solution and ask them for this additional type of model that looks at explanation of figuring out what is the what is the driver of the change. And then the last example is it has a bit of a downside when you look from the CPO and the product owner perspective, and I'll mention that in a second. But this is really infusing that BI model and the BI data into the business tools that Rihanna might be using on the day-to-day. So it might be Excel, it might be Google Spreadsheet. We don't want her to go and export the raw data from Snowflake. We want her to be able to access the BI model already that she has, her team created, and use that within the tools that she knows. Now, the downside of that, if I'm a CPO, and we'll talk about it in a second, is that it actually takes Rihanna outside of my product. So I'm not sure I'm going to expose that option. But sometimes, for some of our customers, if they work with an industry that is traditionally using Excel and spreadsheets, and sometimes you just have to be pragmatic and realize that some of our users, they will always export the data and use Excel no matter what you provide to them within the application. Then in this case, you still have the ability to expose to them a BI model rather than just a flat kind of data model from the data warehouse. So now that we defined what is infused analytics, we need to ask ourselves, why are companies actually going down this path of infusing and embedding analytics? And again, I'm looking at that from infusion into an existing product that they might have, into that fake CRM maybe. And what's interesting is that we'll see that these questions that they're asking and these triggers that they have, they're basically common to any decision that the CPO needs to make when they decide to add a specific feature. So the first one is just simply market pull. Customers are asking for it. So almost any B2B application today is collecting a lot of data. If I'm the user of that application, it's usually my data from my manufacturing plant or from my e-commerce site, whatever it is. And I want to have access to the data, and I want to be able to analyze the data. And I might not have a data science team, and I might not have a BI team available to me that I can just export from the from the CRM or from the e-commerce platform and try to analyze it myself. And many of the prospects that we talk to and existing customers, the main reason that they started this journey is not because they had some eagerness to go into that, it's because their customers said, you need to give us more self-service, and we want to have that in the product. We don't want to export and do it in a different system. So that's probably one of the biggest drivers that our customers are seeing now as ISVs. Just their customers are just asking for it. The next one is a bit more painful. It's the reducing churn and increasing stickiness. So stickiness is kind of obvious in that respect, because we want to have, like we said before, we want the user as a product owner. I want the user to stay in my product. I want them to do everything in my product, other than maybe look at the Slack messages for some alerts. I want them to be focused on getting everything and drive every value that they can from my product, because if they don't do that, they're just going to go to the competitor. And one of our customers, the interesting story is that the CEO of that company, he commissioned a report, just kind of a state of the business and the landscape report from a third-party consultancy, not related to analytics at all. And they came back with a very long report. And one of the things in the report was, if you're not going to invest into self-service analytics in your product, you're going to lag behind your customers within 2 years. It was as clear as it can be. And that was the only reason they actually started pursuing embedding these analytics. Now, how they actually do it, whether it's going to be built in-house or they're going to buy it from someone, that's a separate question that we might address later. But the concept that is driving this is that you need to keep your customers. And as a product owner, you always have to look back to see what the competition is doing, and look also to the sideways and see if the competition is already offering this functionality, because that's going to be a really important feature to have to keep your customers happy and reduce the churn. That also drives the product differentiation, right? So almost every BI out there, B2B product out there, and all of us are using different B2B products, whether it's Bootstrap or Salesforce or almost anything that we can think of. It has some level of BI. Almost all of them have some tab that says analytics. In most cases, it's kind of a static report. Maybe you can export to a CSV and then upload to some other system, to your Power BI or to Excel. But it's not really something that you would look at that, Bootstrap compared to the competitor and say, oh, Bootstrap has this really nice analytics, that's why I'm going to stick with it. So our customers and any B2B ISV provider is looking at analytics, another way of creating that differentiation. And one of the reasons is it's not only creating a differentiation compared to the market, but compared to the competitors, but also in terms of their ability to move faster, right? So if I'm a customer that's using a B2B tool and I have some basic analytics there and I need something new, I'm going to call the vendor, I'm going to go back to the queue of the roadmap, and maybe in 3 to 6 months, maybe that vendor is going to add something. And that vendor realizes that if they want to move fast and they want to be differentiated from the competitors, they have to be able to provide these analytics as self-service much, much faster. They don't have the luxury of putting the customer on hold in a back queue on the backlog for 6 months. So that was a huge aspect that they can suddenly focus on. And that also brings to the next one, which is the ability to potentially create a new revenue stream. So it's not something that, when you pay your subscription to your B2B product, then usually it's including everything. But you can also see customers who are saying, okay, we're going to provide kind of not the basic, but we're going to provide a lot of self-service analytics out of the box with the basic subscription. So everything that we saw before, the KPIs and the alerting and the forecasting and the trend analysis and the explanation, all of that is you get it out of the box with the subscription, with your annual subscription to the B2B product. But for a premium, you're actually going to get a designer role, so you can actually design your own dashboards or your own KPIs within our B2B product, right? So you don't have to go to a separate system and design over there. You can do it within the product, but it's going to cost you a bit more. So that's one approach. It's a great approach, but it's not fitting everyone, because not all of your customers, as an ISV, not all of your customers are going to be advanced enough to actually create these KPIs. They just want to have something out there that they can just drag and drop and start using. And in that case, the impact on the subscription, or if you look at the impact on the subscription, is really that it can justify, even if it's not as a premium add-on to your product, it can justify the cost of the subscription. So if you're charging a bit more than the competitor, you can justify that by saying, look, but you get this self-service analytics that you're not getting with a competitor, and that's going to save you a lot of money down the road, right? So it's really about finding these triggers that are going to make your product, as a product owner, it's going to make your product better and more advanced and more self-service, and at the end of the day, keep your users within that product. Let's take a look at a couple of stats. This is going to be short because I'm not a big fan of the stats. You never know where exactly they're coming from. But I think the sentiment makes sense, right? So all of these ISVs are looking at embedding and infusing analytics as something that is, that's where the future lies. And I think the last metric is the one that I kind of care about the most, because that's the one that really says that most of the, statistically, most of the analytics activities, whether it's forecasting, whether it's just basic reporting, all of that is expected to happen within the application and not within a separate application that you might need to kind of switch context between them. So that's an important kind of important message. Now I want to take a look at 3 examples, right? So what are three examples of customers who use Infuse Analytics to really change the way that their customers are using their own product? The first one is Churn. Even though it sounds like a Swiss name, it's actually an Irish-based company. And what they're doing is channel optimization. So their customers are Nestle and Philips and Fossil and JDE Coffee. these are customers, so they're the brands that are using, that are using Lucerne. They're selling online across any channel that we can think of, across any geography that we can think of, and they need a way to optimize pricing and inventory management and margin across all of these channels, whether it's a marketplace like Amazon and eBay, or it might just be the brand side. So some of the brands are also selling direct, like Nespresso, or it might be through social selling, so whether it's Instagram or Facebook. So they have a system, Lucerne has a system, very elaborate system that's using AI in order to look at all of these pricing and all of these margins between these different systems, between these different channels, and making sure that the inventory is right, that if you sold something in a specific region through Facebook, you're not kind of getting to a situation where you're trying to sell the same thing on your website. Suddenly the inventory is, it's either gone, or maybe the price is not right. So they have a very smart system to leverage that. And the challenge that they had is, they had a lot of data from a lot of data points in relatively, very fast pacing pricing data. So the data was there, it was pretty hard to get to it. But then, again, we're talking about the market pool. The customers that they had said, look, we have all of this data, but we cannot really drive any action from that, right? So I'm putting aside, in the 3 examples that I'm going to give, I'm putting aside a bit the technical challenges of, creating the data model and all of that stuff. That's all legitimate concern, and all of the customers at some point have to deal with it. But I want to focus more on the drivers of using Infuse Analytics as part of the product, before we talk even about the underlying layer of the data. What the customer said is, we have the data, your product is amazing, but what do I do next? What is the call to action when I look at your amazing, B2B portal? So what they did is, other than obviously consolidating the underlying kind of data layer, is adding and infusing all of these advanced analytics that we talked about before. So forecasting and seeing what if analysis, if a price is going to change, if I'm going to put more inventory in a specific channel, how that is going to impact maybe the price in a different geography. All of that became something that was at the tip of the fingers of their users. So they, obviously they stayed more time inside the product, they were happier, and they were able to really leverage the product to the full extent, the product of Lucerne to the full extent, rather than looking at a whole bunch of kind of time series of pricing and then export it to some other tool that then try to analyze that over there. The second example, which is a completely different industry, is Vister. They're selling and creating an aviation management platform. And what they're doing is, it's mainly around, obviously in aviation, it's kind of a CRM ERP for aviation, but their focus is mostly on the safety and security, right? So obviously in safety, in aviation, you have endless aspects of security that you have to take care of, endless aspects of and compliance of safety. And again, it was the same kind of drivers. There was something homegrown. It wasn't really scaling. And the customers at the end of the day, they were pushing for something more advanced. They were pushing for something that is really self-service and something that is not separate from the main workflow. And what Vister did is actually created that is another add-on to their product. So it's not really just, we talked before about the premium subscription, so that's exactly the type of approach they took. They said, okay, you get all of our platform, but you can also get this analytics add-on that allows you to look at these forecasting and advanced analytics in a way that's really going to push the way you forecast and you optimize the way that you manage all the safety concerns and all the safety incidents that you have. So again, it was not only functionality, it also brought a lot of new revenue into the system, into the company, and the actual insights are the ones that actually helped their end customers manage the risk. So the impact was immediate, right? Me as a risk manager within, British Airways, I have a way to actually get access to forecasting and analysis instead of going to some other BI system or another BI maybe team and ask them to analyze the data for me. And then the last example is from a completely different industry, and it's a bit of my kind of favorite. It's actually from performing arts and culture organization. The company is called Tessitura. I think it's US based. And what they developed is an ERP for art and performance and culture organizations. So their customers are the Royal Ballet Company in the UK, the Met Opera in New York, different sports stadiums across the across the US. And the interesting use case there is because it shows how these analytics, these kind of infused analytics, it not only helped them position their product, but in the new reality of the pandemic and COVID, it really made a change to the way that they could operate with their customers and the way that their customers adjusted to the new reality. So the backstory of why they started in embedded analytics is kind of the main story that we heard so far. You have limited analytics, you have a lot of data spread around different places, customers are asking for more functionality, and you can imagine that there are a lot of ERPs out there and there are competitors for them, for Tessitura to actually differentiate. They had to give something to their customers beyond just the platform. And even though the ERP was geared towards their industry, so they have everything around ticketing and managing the stuff around, the theater and all of that stuff, still many ERPs could probably do something very similar, and they need to have some kind of an edge. But everything has changed when the pandemic hit, because what happened, and you probably remember that as well, is there was a massive shift of actually getting culture online. So suddenly these organizations that are used to just sell tickets online, suddenly they had to adjust to actually broadcast a lot of the live performances, and maybe kind of broadcast recorded performances, and maybe record seminars and sell tickets to the seminars, or maybe give them for free. And they had to suddenly manage a whole new channel that they haven't done before. And they had no idea how to do it in terms of actually analyzing, how do I actually understand what is the right pricing for an online event versus everything that I was used to before. So adding these infused analytics to their customers meant that if I'm managing an event in the Met, in New York, I'm able to kind of optimize the way that I'm selling tickets, or maybe even the ticket price, depending on the behavior of my customers, my online customers, which I never had before. And I had to shift and get used to that reality very quickly. So for Tessitura, beyond the differentiation, beyond the fact that now they offered something that they didn't offer before, and the stickiness and all of that, it completely changed the perception of their customers into their product, because suddenly they realized, their customers, that the Tessitura product is not just an ERP. They actually help them go through this pandemic, or through the shift in the way that we are actually consuming culture in a very quick and efficient way. So that was a really interesting use case that is usually completely different from the type of verticals that we see around tech and cybersecurity and all of that. Suddenly you see how data analysis is also impacting things like the way that you're buying a ticket to the opera. So we talked a bit about the what is infused analytics, the value it can give, and some of the examples. But usually when we have prospects, one of the things that we that we ask them to ask themselves, and we'll see that in a second, is some of the questions that they are going to, when that CPO is going to ask for the budget, their CFO is going to ask, why? Why should we invest now? Whether it's going to be in-house development, or it might be something that you were going to buy off the shelf, but it's going to cost you money, it's going to cost you resources. And what we're telling that CPO and product owner, you have to ask yourself a few questions. And if you're not going to ask that, and if you haven't asked these questions before, either that project is not going to start because you're not going to get any budget, or you're going to get a budget, but it's going to fail because there's no actual need behind it. So the first question that we're asking, and it's broken down to a few, is why now? Can you, as the product owner, can you actually elaborate what is the value that these infused analytics are going to bring to your system? Because infused analytics is really cool. We saw the forecasting before, we saw the explanations, but it doesn't, if it doesn't bring any value to your customers, no one is going to use it. It's just going to be a KPI or some functionality that's not going to be used. And your CFO is going to come chasing you and asking, why did you spend all that money on that subscription? And can you articulate the ROI? And in the case of Vista, when they actually had a premium subscription, it's a bit easier. But sometimes it's a bit more amorphic, and you have to say, look, this is positioning us as a premium product within our industry. So we're not going to charge more for this forecasting capability, but we are going to position ourselves in a specific way that is going to allow us and justify the subscription that is going to be slightly higher than the competitors. So you have to define that first before you go down this route. And then you have to look and see what you already have. Because like I said before, if you look at almost any B2B solution out there, there is some analytics. There's at least one nice bar chart that is probably not doing much, but it's there. And sometimes that's all they need. And some of the prospects that we talk to, especially if it's a small company that has maybe 5 customers and they're just starting off, they might have actually quite a lot of data, but they don't really know how to articulate the value. And to be honest, they might be better off just getting kind of an open source library to do a bit of visualization with JavaScript, and that's probably going to be fine for the next couple of years. You have to understand and you have to articulate yourself and to your team, whether it's the R&D or the person who's going to sign the check, why the existing solution might not be sufficient. And we saw before it might be just a market pull because the customers are calling and saying, look, your competitors are giving this out of the box and you're just giving me this, crappy pie chart. I need more. Then it's easier to explain that. And then the last one is, like any sales event, what is the compelling event, right? The competition is behind you, or maybe just kind of breathing down your neck. Maybe you're seeing churn and you're collecting that as a product owner. Hopefully you're collecting the feedback from these churning customers, and maybe some of the things that they're saying is, look, everything is great, but I cannot get any value from all of this data that you're exposing to me. Then you have a better way of going back to your CFO and saying, we need to invest in Infuse Analytics in a way that's really going to push our product forward. So if you as a product owner, you manage to answer all of these questions, you then have to ask yourself, what do you actually need? Because analytics is a broad term. Embedded in Infuse Analytics is also a broad term. It can be, like we said, it can be just a forecast. It can be just an interactive couple of widgets. It can be a designer where I can actually design my own dashboard, or it can be just an export to CSV so I can just go and play with my Excel. So you need to define, and we help you as the as the provider of the solution. We help you define what are the actual actionable insights that you want to get out of the solution. So if you look at Lucerne, then the use case of optimizing prices in near real time is very clear. I have 3 channels. I'm selling on Amazon, but I'm also sending my coffee capsules in my store. I want to make sure that I'm pricing it correctly. I want to make sure that Amazon is not selling it too low, while I'm keeping my kind of Nespresso, premium brand name. All of that is very easy to articulate for me as a product owner. And the same goes for the underlying data that is going to feed into data analytics too. So we talked before about, I didn't really talk too much about the underlying data and all of the interactions and all of the integrations, but at the end of the day, you might have the best reasons to start this journey, but your data might be a mess, right? And then you start, and then your data team is saying, this is not going to perform. The database that we have, it's not geared towards analytics. So you also have to look at what is underlying all of these insights and what is underlying all of these KPIs and widgets and forecasting, because you need something to feed into that. And that's something that, when you talk with prospects, it always surfaces sometimes for them the disconnect that might happen between what product thinks and what the CDO thinks and what R&D thinks. And some of them, in some cases, each one of these stakeholders have a completely different view of what is important in analytics and what is important in embedded analytics. And sometimes we, as kind of a third party, kind of the UN, we come in as someone who's neutral and trying to figure out what is the best way to kind of bring together all of these stakeholders. And then the last question, which we're not going to dive too deeply into, is whether you can do it in-house. I think we talked about it before. If it's a relatively easy use case and you have, the resources, then usually if you're a small startup, you're going to start with some kind of an in-house solution. But relatively quickly, you're going to hit a wall. and that wall is going to be the reality of scaling and self-service and all of that. And the focus is not analytics. Your focus is selling safety, safety platform, ERP, and that's where you're going to say, okay, I need it, but I cannot do it by myself. We're kind of running out of time, so I just want to wrap it up. I don't think I'm being courted out of stage. So just to wrap it up, so we just talked briefly about what is exactly Infuse Analytics, why it's important for products, how it can drive the value. Again, I'm looking at that strictly from the point of view of the product owner, the CPO that we're trying to sell into, and then they need to sell into their CFO and CEO. Seeing some examples of customers who use that approach. And then lastly, what are the questions, if you're the product owner, what are the questions that you should ask yourself before you go down this route, and how you can kind of harness the best value out of that proposition. So thank you very much. We have a booth, which I cannot remember the number now, but it's just at the entry. If you have any questions, please come over and ask. Thank you for coming. Thank you.